Welcome, everybody. Can you hear me? Welcome, everybody, to this plenary session. Hi, Jorge.
Hi, Ariana. Good to see you.
Hi, Jorge. Good to see you again as well. Sorry, but I wasn't able to see you, so I started to introduce the plenary. But anyway, I leave you to introduce us.
Okay. So we are going to attend the first plenary lecture, which is going to be presented by Professor Walter Ongisto from Finland. And the chair of this session is Ariana Astolfi, my colleague, and also the next organizer of the Forum Acoustic and the other events in the near future. Thank you, Ariana, for being here. And you may proceed now for the introduction of our speaker. Thank you very much, both.
Thank you, Jorge. Welcome to this plenary conference. Welcome to Valtteri Ongisto.
Thank you.
Welcome to you. And this conference is titled Office Noise, Effects and Control. Valtteri Ongisto is our speaker, and a brief summary of his curriculum. Valtteri is the research group leader of Built Environment Research Group in Turku University of Applied Sciences, more precisely. And additionally, he is a professor both in Aalto University and University of Turku. And he acts as a university lecturer in Aalto University and Tampere University. Valtteri has published 65 peer-reviewed journal papers, more than 150 other scientific articles, and he supervised 6 doctoral students. He graduated in physics in 1993 from University of Turku, and started his career in 1992 in the Finnish Institute of Occupational Health, having a laboratory space without fixed purpose and personnel at the very beginning. Later on, it was developed through an accredited test laboratory of airborne sound insulation and absorption. His main interests were this laboratory test and occupational noise control until his doctorate in 2000. Since 2001, instead, room acoustics of open plan offices became another permanent research field, and research fields of environmental psychology involving field surveys began in 2001 to address the benefits of office noise control. The first laboratory experiment on cognitive psychology regarding the benefits of office noise control was conducted in 2004. In 2006, Valtteri Ongisto started as a university lecturer in Aalto University. He used to teach about noise effects, inspired to study that had to deal with the effect of neighbor, road traffic, wind turbine noise in apartments, etc. This led to the creation of psychoacoustic laboratory and research in this field concerning the annoyance of living and specific environmental sounds. In 2016, his research group moved to Turku University of Applied Sciences, and he, with his group, built a new and totally silent building acoustics and psychophysics laboratories, dated 2020. The labs enabled the testing of impact sound insulation, and this lab currently has 10 persons, and so 10 persons in his acoustic group that deal with the perception of timber floor sound insulation and on the effects of room acoustics on workers in activity-based offices. Lately, anyway, Valtteri has been active in developing the ISO standard 3382 part 3 and the ISO 23351 part 1. And daily work has always been versatile, involving public funded scientific research, consultation services to private companies, management, and teaching. Planned future expansions may involve, for example, open schools. This is a brief curriculum vitae of Valtteri Ongisto, and I leave him the floor for his plenary conference on office noise, effects, and control. Thank you, Valtteri.
Thank you. I hope you can see the screen and hear my voice. Okay, I will now give my keynote presentation on this topic, and I'm honored to be here, and thank you for the Congress organizers that you considered me to be a speaker here. As you heard, I have 20 years background in office noise research, and now I try to summarize that in 40 minutes. Okay, you already introduced myself so well, so I go to topics of today. So I begin with field evidences about the effects of office noise, then about office noise and stress, performance effects of speech, room acoustic measurements in offices, which is leading finally to noise control. Why office noise is important to control? That is not just an acoustician who can say that it is important. We need also environmental psychology and to prove that. And one of the earliest excessive studies on this were published in 2006 by Petersen et al. From Denmark. They studied the prevalence of adverse environmental perceptions in various office types. And they could find, first of all, that if we look at different indoor environmental factors, we can see quite important trend for noise, that when the office size is only one occupant, and when the size increases to large open plan office with more than 28 occupants, the prevalence systematically increases. And such a strong increment cannot be seen on any other indoor environmental factor. And in this figure, it is very clear what happens. So when we are going to open plan offices, noise in the room might become an issue. Another important approach to this office environment is environmental satisfaction as such. That's another variable that needs to be studied. One of the most important papers has been presented from Czech in 2012, and after that, many other papers have been published from the same data, but it has increased since then. But already at that time, it was evident that people are satisfied to most factors of building, except temperature and sound privacy. The sound privacy is expected to mean something like speech privacy, not noise, because noise level is here separately mentioned, and people are not actually so much complaining about noise than about privacy. And this was 53,000 people. They know more about office work than I do. Inspired by all this, we conducted one survey also in open plan offices. We looked after different room acoustic qualities in the offices and managed to get 21 offices and altogether 883 respondents from those 21 offices. And we measured physically the destruction distance in each office. A destruction distance is a quantity that is derived according to this ISO standard. And it is the distance where a speech transmission index falls below 0.5. It has been agreed in this standard that this is the definition, and it usually means that the shorter the destruction distance is, the more you have to put effort to communicate with people being far away. So if the destruction distance is large, you can hear the voice very long distances. Hapakangas et al. Asked also about the disturbance of noise, and they found that the proportion of highly disturbed people was much larger if the destruction distance was large. So that was an important finding, which also suggests that the STI has a role in this disturbance, and STI can be controlled by room acoustic means. Sickness absence is one health outcome in workplaces, and there are 3 studies, all made in Nordic countries, by the way, which suggest that people working in open plan office have a higher risk of being at sick leave. And okay, this study is only suggesting something about office types and layouts. They can't say that noise is the reason, but we know that noise and lack of street privacy could be an important reason to higher risk of sick leave in open plan offices, because it is a general problem there, but this has not been proven yet. And finally, risk of disability retirement. It has been found to be higher in open plan offices. This is a very important registry study, and similar publications are very few. That was based on registry data on disability retirement and sickness absence from Norwegian occupational cohort of office workers. And in addition, a questionnaire was used to achieve information on occupants' office solution and many other questions that were used in the analysis. In overall, the result was that working in shared and open plan offices had significantly higher risk of subsequent disability retirement compared to employees in private office rooms.
Valtteri, can you move to the presentation mode?
No.
No, okay.
Okay, our body, it reacts to noise. And one short finding on that. Very little is known actually about the physiological effects of office noise. Stress means that human body has become alert, and investigating stress is relevant because prolonged stress may lead to long-term adverse health effects. we know that speech is the main noise sources of offices. There is no question about that. Therefore, we set a purpose in our recent study to determine the psychological, physiological, and cognitive effects of speech on human while they are working on cognitively demanding tasks, like in the office. And we conducted a medical laboratory experiment with 2 sound conditions. And the medical experiment was needed because we had here the cannula in the arm, and we measured the concentrations of different stress hormones in blood plasma. We studied 2 conditions, which were speech and silence, and each condition was recruited by 20 participants. The experimental procedure was very difficult and long. We had to prepare all people coming in and putting the catheters to the arm and all heart rate monitors, doing hearing tests, different questionnaires, testing and practicing the cognitive tests. And then the experiment began here. Blood samples and questionnaires are with red and blue lines. And then here is the exposure to the experimental sound. So we had baseline and exposure phases, and restoration or experiment took about 3 hours. The outcomes were showing that speech has physiological effects on us, and they are adverse. Stress hormone level in blood plasma was significantly higher in speech than in silence, and this figure is about that. Also, similar finding was found in heart rate variability. On top of that, we measured the performance of the tasks that they were working during the experiment, and we found adverse effects on 2 tasks out of 3. And also, of course, people were more annoyed about speech than silence, but we could also see that they had a larger workload. So because acute stress reaction was observed already after 45 minutes exposure, it is probable that noise-induced stress also takes place in office workplaces. And as I said, prolonged stress may lead to long-term adverse health effects. Therefore, the finding that already a 65 dBA speech causes acute stress is important reason to control noise from occupational health point of view. Now I jump to performance effects. How speech in the office affects our cognition. I try to make it very simple. When speech begins, it captures our attention, by the way, but then we have to choose, are we listening or disregarding? If we decide to listen, then we are a partner in communication and the speech is used for information. It is not noise. But if we decide to disregard, the same speech is becoming noise and it affects us adversely. And when we try to focus on another primary task during this irrelevant speech, it increases our workload. Some people can exert without being distracted by the speech, but most of us cannot. And therefore, the performance of the primary task may be deteriorated. I take one example of this. We did one experiment in 2009 to test the hypothetical model of mind from 2005. So in 2005, there was a need to develop a model which explains why the performance is reduced in the office, but there was very little experimental evidence at that time. You can see these dots are the experimental evidences, and this is the model, which is hypothetic because there's no strong evidence. And the model describes the relationship between speech transmission index and decrement of cognitive performance. And the higher STI is, the worse the performance becomes. But on the other hand, above 0.6, there is no more effect of increasing STI. So we conducted a laboratory test, experiment to test this model in the relevant STI range below 0.6, where the decrement is taking place. And the experiment was planned so that all sound conditions, all three sound conditions had the same A-weighted sound pressure level, so that the energy of noise was the same. But we had three different STIs, 10, 35, and 65, and they were mixing superpositions of speech and masking, so that STI 0.10 was having very negative speech-to-noise ratio, and in STI 0.65, the speech-to-noise ratio was strongly positive. And we produced speech from the loudspeaker randomly from one of the corner at the time, so that people were trying to focus on the tasks during the exposure. And 37 subjects were recruited to this experiment. And we could find evidence which supported the model of mine for 3 tasks out of 6, but not for every task. So it seems that all tasks are not affected by STI and room acoustic quality. We could find significant differences in tasks 1, 2, and 4, number series, operation span, and reading comprehension in one part of it. And because Haka et al., that study that I showed here, that study is only one of the many studies that have been published later on to test the model of mine in 2005. It was topical in 2018 to test the hypothetic model again and use recent experimental evidence like Haka et al. And many others. And we involved now more authors here, one who is good in meta-analysis, one who is good in cognitive psychology, and myself. So we could try to make the hypothetic model an evidence-based model. The work is described here. It is a literature review, of course, because it's a meta-analysis. Certain keywords were used in data search, and 1,255 records or papers were identified, but we had very strict inclusion criterion in our study. For example, that all papers had to be journal papers, and it had to be native speech, and many other inclusion criteria. And finally, 14 journal papers could be accepted to the meta-analysis, and they included 34 tests. And we were aware about the fact that we might need to analyze different test types, because we already found in this Haka study that all tests are not sensitive to STI. The performance decrement was calculated by this very simple equation where we calculate the relative decrement of performance compared to condition where STI is 0. So if at STI 0, the paper reports that the performance is 95 units something, and the performance 80 units in STI 0.6, it means that the decrement of performance at STI 0.6 becomes 15.8%. So that's the way how the relative performance decrement was calculated. And this is showing that all the data from all 14 papers, including all 34 tests involved to those papers. And it confirms the our assumption that the decrement of performance is not, it is depending on task type. There must be something on these tasks which are not affected by STI, and on the other hand, we have many data here which are clearly affected by it. So we had to do the detailed analysis over task types, and that's where we needed this cognitive psychology experts, and we could divide the test types in these 14 papers to 7 different task types. And some of them were very well represented, like the simple verbal short-term memory tasks, which are very much used in cognitive psychology in general. And on the other hand, for example, simple non-verbal short-term memory tasks were few. And therefore, we analyzed all these task types separately, and we could find only one task type that was showing strong evidence about STI dependence. And this is now the revised model. This is replacing the previous model, which was hypothetical. It shows quite systematic relationship between the experimental data, decrement of performance versus STI. And the fit over this data is given by this equation. It is simply a function of STI. And if we analyze the correlation between observed DP and predicted DP, the correlation coefficient is 0.86, which is pretty good. We must remember that this is human science and not natural science, so that kind of correlation coefficient is really good. So this is now based on strong evidence, and it is allowed to use this as some reason why to invest on room acoustics and STI reduction in workplaces. Now a little bit about room acoustic measurements before we jump to noise control. Room acoustic measurements in open plan offices, they are conducted in such a way that a path is chosen which crosses the workstations, at least 5 workstations, preferably more, but not more than 11. And 2 paths are preferably chosen, and loudspeaker is put on one end, and measurements are conducted in the other workstations along the path. And the measurements are made for ping noise, sound pressure level of ping noise from the speaker, and background noise level of the room, and speech transmission index. And must be emphasized that the measurements are conducted in unoccupied office when the ventilation and masking sounds are on, because this is describing only the room acoustic quality of the office and not the noise conditions caused by the user. Thereafter, the results are normalized for the sound pressure level of ping noise to conform with normal effort speech. So that's a transformation of the data, so that we pretend in a way that the loudspeaker would have been standard speech, which has this sound power level. And finally, the single number quantities are determined. And the single number quantities are determined for A-weighted sound pressure level of speech. So here is the y-axis, A-weighted sound pressure level of standard effort speech, and this is the distance from the loudspeaker in the office. And the data is usually along a line when the x-axis is logarithmic. And we can determine the D2S value here, which is the slope, and 4 meter sound pressure level at 4 meter distance, and comfort distance, which is the distance where A-weighted sound level falls below 45. And these are not sensitive to background noise of the room. And then we have also this distraction distance, which I already introduced previously. So it is a distance where SDI falls below 0.5. And the reason for this 0.5 is coming from this revised model and hypothetical model, where we can see that SDI values under 0.5 are beneficial. Distraction distance is very much sensitive to background noise and sound masking, while these quantities are not sensitive to them. The range of these quantity values is very large. We published recently a survey of globally available data from different countries: Australia, Switzerland, Finland, Germany. And it seems that, for example, distraction distance RD here, it varies from 2 meters to 21 meters. And the analysis is here over the 7 studies. It seems that there are not very much differences between countries. We can have small and large values in all countries. So, but the variation in distraction distance were huge, from 2 to 21 meters, and between country differences are absent. So it seems that offices are alike globally. Because Hapakangas et al. Stated that probability of highly disturbed by noise reduces with reducing distraction distance. Therefore, the potential of controlling noise by improving room acoustics is actually huge, because we can have the office from 2 meters to 20 meters by room acoustic modification. And now I go to modifications and noise control. So the noise control methods that we can have in office are, first of all, legislation. We can have legislation which states that we need to have certain attempts. And then we can have room acoustics methods like ceiling absorbers, wall absorbers, curtains, screens, absorbing screens, soft floors, sound masking. In addition, we can have architectural methods which are more dealing with sound insulation. We can have soundproof rooms close to open plan offices, isolation of noisy spaces like coffee areas and aisles, sufficient workstation distances, and pots and booths. And organizational methods. One of the frequently used method is this activity-based office, where it is decided that the different spaces are used for different tasks. And that's also what is mentioned usually in the office noise etiquette, that you should speak in that side of the office and not on the other side, for example. Team grouping according to task type is one organizational method. Silent and communication zones, it has something to do with this activity-based office. Offering qualified headsets for people who speak a lot. Crowd indicating displays. This is something new, which shows to a person who's coming to the office that he or she can see where people are more or less in a display, so that one can choose a silent area, for example. And remote work contracts. Individual Our behavioral methods are, for example, that I choose a soundproof workstation for my work today. I notify colleagues if they are noisy. That's not very friendly, but that's one way. Remote working, so I stay home. I don't want to go there. Hearing protectors, local sound masking, choosing task type insensitive to noise, so switching between different tasks, and choosing another workplace, which is really appearing in our questionnaire data sometimes. So this is a very broad family of noise control methods. But I will focus now on room acoustics in the first place. This ISO standard, for example, has been so powerful in Finland that Finnish regulations were launched for the first time for open plan office acoustics. And I promise that they are the most stringent globally. The reverberation time must be under 0.6 seconds, and speech transmission index shall be under 0.5 when the distance is more than 5 meters from the speaker in a furnished room. And that is really much affecting the workplace quality nowadays. There is some laboratory evidence which is proving that we can control any office to any level in room acoustic quality. We conducted, published in Applied Acoustics last year, a study where we built in an open plan office of 90 square meters. We built 22 different room acoustic settings by hands, so that we changed the ceiling absorption from either zero absorption coefficient or 0.9, so 2 levels of absorption. In the same way, in walls, we had 2 levels of absorption, 0.1 or 1, and screens had absorption of nothing or highly absorbing, and screen heights were from 0 to 1.3, 1.7, and 2.1 meters. And we could see that the D2S quantity was 1.3 dB in the worst case when nothing was done. Let's find it here. This here. Ceiling is hard, walls are hard, screens are absent. So it is just a bare workplace, which is sometimes found in real workplaces. And 8.5 decibels was the highest spatial decay. It was found here, 0.9 ceiling, fully absorbing walls, screen absorbing, screens are sound absorbing, and screens are very high. And we can see that the effect is on sound pressure level is not so big at 2 meter distance, only about 7 decibels or 8 decibels, but at 8 meter distance, the effect is 20 decibels. So there's a huge difference between the values, although they are measured in the same office. I show you now an example how this all has affected the way how offices are designed in Finland nowadays. Room acoustic, I show a case study, LähiTapiola. That's the name of a Finnish company. You can try to pronounce it there in your homes. But it's LähiTapiola. And that office was, it looks like this. So the ceiling is fully sound absorbing. Curtains are here on the facade. This wall on the back is fully sound absorbing. The screens here are table mounted. They have class B sound absorption glass. Floor is made of soft textile. And there is sound masking in the ceiling. Here you can see the ceiling mounted masking speakers. And this is the layout of of the office. So this is quite standard way of building offices in Finland nowadays. And what is obtained with all of this treatment, we got destruction distance of 2.3 meters. The regulation requires that it should be less than 5 meters. So it is possible to make better workplaces than the decree requires. And this is where we expect to have a much better performance than in the case where you are not doing all those treatments. Finally, I would like to say a couple of words about these booths. As you can see here, also in this office, there are these phone booths, and that's a quite new trend in offices, that all offices become more and more open plan offices, but then one needs a place where to go during a phone call or telemeeting or webinar. And there are different kinds of booths available in the market, as you can see here. And there is now one way of developing workplaces better and better is to use and to choose the products so that they have been tested according to this new standard, which is a method to determine the speech level reduction of these furniture ensembles and enclosures. So this standard describes how many decibels the product reduces the sound power level of speech. So in simplicity, the measurement is sound power level measurement according to 37541 method, first without the booth or enclosure, and then with the enclosure, so that the speaker is inside. And the difference of these two sound power levels gives the DSA value. And the larger the value, the better reduction of noise. And also this kind of classification is available so that the manufacturers can sell their products accordingly. There is now some evidence about the values. For example, this table here, which is a furniture ensemble, it looks not very efficient. And actually, it has been measured, and the speech level reduction is 0.0 decibels. So it is quite logical. And then when we increase the degree of enclosure, we get better and better values. And when we finally close it entirely, we jump to a different category with these booths. They begin to be more than 15 decibels. And actually, we did a market survey recently of 11 commercially available phone booths, which are shown here. And the values are something between 15 and 30 decibels. So one can control noise in the office with these products and make open plan office much better place to live, but one should choose the best performing products. Okay, I come to the end now, and what I see that are the future research needs. I think that more evidence is still needed about the contribution of noise control of any kind on the open plan office on environmental satisfaction, job satisfaction, work performance, and so on. There is very little evidence from the field which proves that this noise control affects people. Also, we need more information about the benefits of activity-based offices. That's a place where, that's a way of trying reduce noise in the office by behavioral individual methods, organizational methods, and architectural methods. But do they really help the situation? Also, cultural differences are interesting. It has been said that people in for example, not in Finland, but other countries are more noisy than we are. And it would be interesting to conduct some comparative analysis about that question. And finally, I jump to the last. I think that the open education environments, they have been already investigated, but I think more research is needed on that. Okay, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Valtteri. Thank you for your very interesting presentation. I open the questions and answer session for Valtteri Ongisto. If anyone has questions, I have a question for you from Zi Zhang. Thank you for your presentation. I know there are apps that can play ambient noise such as sound as a loud coffee shop with people talking and cutlery clicking that seem to improve the productivity and attention span. This seems contradict with the relationship between the STI and the DI, since you get less distracted when the sound exists. Would you give us some insights in explaining this seeming discrepancy?
I don't know what is DI. I'm sorry about that, but
It's not DI.
I try to. I know there are apps that can play ambient noise. Yeah, it is a question about playing masking sound, maybe via headphones. Yeah, and that has been found to have this masking effect, and that is actually one of the ways to control noise in my presentation. But the masking in private applications like these headphones here, I can play here whatever noise I want, and it is controlled by me, and that's of course everyone's individual way of coping the noisy situation, and but that's not something that I recommend in the full office, that someone plays this very loud noise throughout the time. So the masking in the open plan office should be not more than 44 dB to avoid the situation that people begin to communicate louder.
Okay, if I may add something. But actually by saying DI, I meant distraction distance, where you mentioned in approximately in the very beginning of your presentation, you mentioned the distraction distance and also the speech transmission index. And you said more or less there is a positive relevance between the two. And also in the middle part of your presentation, you said if there is a conversation going on in the office, then most likely it could be a distraction to the people who works there. So actually my point is for those kind of ambient noise apps that I just mentioned, especially for this specific noise where in the coffee shop, they do talk quite loudly. So actually that's also a kind of conversation to the workers. But in this specific case, it's not really decreasing the productivity, but it's helping the productivity.
If you play loud noise from the headphones, for example, I don't understand this. This is not really dealing with office environments, maybe this question. I'm sorry.
No problem. Let's go on with other questions. Please, okay, book in the chat in case. I have a question about the prediction methods that you can use in at the design stage of your open plan office. Consider that you could have different layouts so that it is not univocal, the way of designing offices. Particularly, it is very heterogeneous across countries, as you mentioned before in your conclusions, where you said that noise is different, chatting noise and noise from people inside the office can be very, very different across countries. And in the Southern Europe, it is stated that noise is louder than in Northern Europe.
I don't know. It should be investigated. I wouldn't say anything before seeing that.
Okay, anyway, what about the design phase?
Design phase. Do you mean, are there differences?
No, I would like to know which tool could be used to design office acoustics.
Yes, there are 3 methods that I know. One is this, just by memory and using good principles. That is one of the most important method, because in principle the room acoustic design is very easy. But when you have to go in more detail and more preciseness, there are 2 alternatives. One is to use so-called simplified methods that I didn't present today, but I have here one study on that also. So we have actually so there is one way of predicting these single number quantities of ISO standard. Is that one way is to use these simplified regression models, because they give pretty good precision based on the analysis that we have conducted in this paper. So one can approach the modeling question with this, but another way is to use this geometric commercial prediction software. But we have been investigating them also, but it seems that they are not performing essentially better than these simple regression equations, compared to the fact that it requires quite a lot of effort to make those models.
Thank you. Other questions from the audience? I have another point that I can ask you to comment. You performed such a very controlled and precise studies with respect to all the influence factors related to well-being, work performance, and so on. Don't you think that it is important not only to consider acoustics when you carry out these studies, so that the environmental quality is not only acoustics, and I suppose that other quantities, other aspects of perception can affect all your data, all the data that are related to the performance, to the perception, and so on.
You asked if there are other factors than noise. Was that your question?
Yes, that
Yes,
you can investigate
yes,
in the future,
yes.
and that can improve your models and your provisions.
We have used this psychoacoustics. Actually, the name is psychophysics laboratory, and we have used that method to investigate the effect of indoor air quality and temperature on performance and stress as well. And it seems that we can find also very interesting results from that point of view, but that is not related to noise, but it is, on the other hand, important to look at the work environment from broader perspective, because the investors and building owners, they are not liking the idea that, hey, there is a guy who is only talking about noise and he doesn't care anything else but noise and acoustics and noise. So that's why it is sometimes important to discuss all these factors, how they affect people, and then to show that the noise has this especially strong effect. That's what we have found, actually, that noise has stronger effect on
more than others, than
yes.
the other
Yes.
aspects.
Yes.
Thank you. We have I have another small questions, but anyway, you have in the chat. We have 1 minute. Thank you for Lowena Strepi for the interesting presentation. My question is on design aspects of the sound booths. How can their acoustics be predicted? The general guidelines? Very quick answer,
Yes.
please.
That is a research topic of the future. Actually, all the energy has gone during last a couple of years to the standardization of the method, and we also did a round robin on that. But actually, the product development is purely on the hands of the manufacturers. But there would be also a need to develop something which is more theoretical and more transparent to all researchers in the world, because I think that's an interesting idea to understand how the sound transmits through the phone envelope, because there are glass and thick wall parts and inner sound absorption materials and ventilation silencers and everything in a very small space. So that's quite demanding too.
It's a challenge.
Yes.
It's a challenge, of course. Thank you very much, Valtteri, for your presentation, for your interesting insights that you share with us. Thank you for to the organizers, and I am ending this session now, and I'm introducing the meeting that will be soon from 1 to 2 p.m. Lisbon time on the technical committee on room and building acoustics that I will co-chair. So that I invite you to participate, and also Valtteri in case, and thank you very much, and have a good conference.
Thank you, Ariana.
Thank you.
And thank you, Valtteri.
Regards to Madeira.
Thank you.
It's a pity, you know.
I am in Madeira. Are you?
You are in Madeira.
Of course.
Virtually. Bye-bye. Good to see you.
Good.
Okay, thank you very much. We will start at 2:20 Lisbon time. Sorry, Ariana, but only the people that has the Zoom link can participate in the
Yes, but anyway, I
You can give
uploaded the link of the Zoom meeting right now in the chat, so that everybody can participate in case of interest. You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So the link is in the chat. Yes.
And also the breakout rooms are open if you want to go there and see and speak with the technical expositions. And here we will pass the publicity of the technical exposition. Have a nice lunch. And you also have now the link for the room and building acoustics TC meeting on the chat.
Already uploaded.
As an environmental noise consultant, it is your job to advise clients and protect citizens against noise pollution. With the available noise prediction software, this is no problem. That is, if you're lucky enough to get the dongle. Otherwise, doing your job becomes a bit more complicated. Now, what if it doesn't have to be like this anymore? Meet the new Predictor Lima Cloud Calculation Service. Our cloud solution transforms any single-user local license into a multi-user cloud license. This makes dongles a thing of the past and enables your whole team to simultaneously use Predictor Lima from any location imaginable. Pretty cool, huh? Furthermore, all calculations take place at our secured data center. This makes large-scale noise mapping even faster without any investment in hardware or IT. Do you also want to stop using software from the past to prepare urban areas for the future? Visit our website and request a free trial license today.
Imagine a warm summer day with your windows open and suddenly a noise outside. What you want in these cases is control. See, still there.
In these cases, the power of shutting the noise off is key. This is why we are looking for investors to back up a blind that allows air and light through if desired, but blocks unwanted sounds. Imagine it at home in front of an air conditioning unit, or in an open office setup for the days when your colleagues are just noisy neighbors, or even in a busy hospital with alarms buzzing all around.
What we do is we engineer quietness, still there, and we use acoustic metamaterials.
Let's work together towards a new way to design and experience sound.